Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is eject, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Abdi. Abdi, thank you so much for this suggestion. Now let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb eject being used can mean to force something or to throw something out in a violent or sudden way. As I looked for recent examples of this verb being used, it's kind of sad to say that many newspaper articles, other news reports use this to talk about people who were involved in auto accidents and who were forced out the windshield or through a window in that violent or sudden way. You might hear or read something to the effect of a person was ejected from a vehicle as a result of an accident. A second way you might encounter eject can mean to cause something to be expelled from a machine. Now, depending on your age, it's possible you at some time used tape recorders or CD players, and there was commonly a button labeled this way, eject, right? And it was how you would remove or open and secure the object, right? And you still can hear this used with various machines. We'll look at some examples a little bit later. A third way to use the verb eject can mean to escape from an aircraft by being explosively propelled out of it. This is most commonly used with military members who may be fighting various fights or battles, and it gives them a way to escape a dangerous situation, so to remove themselves from the aircraft. A fourth way you might encounter the verb eject can mean to compel someone to leave a place or position. Now, again, as I looked for real examples of this verb being used, I saw numerous instances of this being used in connection to sports. And there are times where certain players, coaches, or other personnel might be removed from the game, either because their behavior, their words, something has happened that requires them to be removed. They can't stay on the sidelines. It's not like they're injured and they're just going to watch. The official or referee, what have you, forces the person to leave the game, leave the pitch, the playing field, whatever surface might be in use. A fifth way you might encounter the verb eject being used can mean to give off or to emit. For now, you should know that eject is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms ejecting. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, eject, ends in a t sound. This means when we add an ed ending, we're going to add an extra syllable to our verb. So here, ed is going to make an id sound. The past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this: ejected, ejected. Now, let's take a moment and look at a phrasal verb that is very commonly used, and that is to eject from. There are a few different ways we could use this. The first might mean to propel someone or something out of something else. This goes back to that first meaning. You might think of that violent and sudden movement out of something. An example of this could be: 2 passengers were ejected from the car. And again, it's I'm kind of sad to share that this is such a frequent story, at least in the United States and our media. Many times when people do not wear their seat belts or safety belts in vehicles, this could be a result, particularly after impact of an accident. A second way to use eject from could mean to forcibly remove someone from a situation or a place. Again, this is an example we just talked about earlier. So, an example of how you might hear this used: the athlete was ejected from the game in the fourth quarter. So, I think I noticed something very similar to this in relation to a basketball game. So, that's what our sentence is taking from. Now let's continue practicing our verb of the day, and we'll practice and review a couple different verb tenses. The first thing we'll talk about is the imperative. The imperative is another way to say a command. Here we are telling someone either to do an action, so that's going to be our affirmative or our positive, or we're telling them not to do a particular action. There are no yes or no questions. This is about directing someone again to either do or not do a particular action. The imperative is rather unique in English. This is the one time we're not going to begin a sentence with a subject, right? And that's because our subject is implied. It is understood. It's either you singular or you plural, depending on if I'm speaking to one person or to two or more people. So when I go to make an affirmative or positive imperative sentence, I can just begin with that base verb. So no special endings. An example of this might be, eject the printer cartridge and replace it with a new one. Okay? This goes back, I think, to our second definition, talking about removing something from a particular mechanism. So here we're maybe talking about kind of the ink. Sometimes there are different colored ones, depending on, is this a home or is it more of a commercial, industrial type photocopier and printer. So here someone is directing another person to do this action. Another way, or a negative way, I guess, to give the imperative is to start with do not and then the base verb. Again, no special endings on the end of the verb. So you might hear someone else say, don't eject the flash drive while it is in use. So here, they don't want you to remove it from a computer. Maybe someone is still saving something, or they're modifying some sort of file that's connected, and removing it or disconnecting it could somehow damage that file or the drive. Now let's move on and make some sentences in the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about completed actions that occurred at a known point in the past. Nice thing about making sentences in the simple past tense is that our structure to the sentence stays the same no matter what our subject is. So, whether we have I, you, we, they, he, she, or it, what you will see next is that ed form of the verb. And that's what we're going to be using in our affirmative or positive sentences. An example of this might be, the pilot ejected from the fighter jet just in time. So here we're talking about a completed action. Even though we don't know exactly when this was completed, we do know they maybe did it just before something awful happened with the jet. Maybe there's a mechanical issue, or maybe someone else was aiming for it, attacking it, right? Now, if you want to make a negative simple past tense sentence, again, you want to start with your subject, then you'll use did not, and then the base verb. Notice we're not adding ed to the end of the verb here. Here's another example. Referees didn't eject the fighting players immediately. So maybe they were trying to settle things down, and or maybe they needed to review some video, some tape of what occurred, who was responsible for what, before, it sounds like, eventually some of them were removed or compelled to leave the game. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the simple past tense, you want to start with did, then we'll have our subject, and then the base verb. Again, I love pointing out to my students, notice I'm not adding ed to the end of the verb when I'm making a yes or no question. I'm only doing that in the affirmative. Here's another example. Did security eject the rowdy fans before the game even started? So again, as I looked for real recent examples of this verb being used, this was unfortunately another one I saw connected to sports. So not only can coaches and players be removed, but sometimes fans can as well if they're threatening other fans, behaving inappropriately, and it sounds like we might be asking for clarification about when something happened in this particular situation. Now, let's spend a moment talking about some words that are related to our verb eject. And the first word we'll talk about is the noun form, which is ejection. This noun can have a couple different meanings. One way to talk about it is to discuss the emission or the action of forcing or throwing something out. An example of this could be the volcano's ash ejection covered the nearby town. Right? So this would probably tie most closely to our noun here, emission. Right? So it's being pushed out into the atmosphere here, covering maybe miles, large areas. A second way to use the noun ejection is to talk about an expulsion or the action of forcing someone to leave a particular place or maybe to leave a certain position. An example of this could be, it was the coach's fourth ejection of the season. Well, it's the same for there are 4 instances where the coach has been compelled to leave the game to kind of stop that action of coaching and head to the locker room. Another noun you might encounter is ejector. This can refer to a device that causes something to be removed or to drop out. An example of this might be, the battery ejector has been criticized as a safety hazard. So in the last month or 6 weeks, there was a demonstration of a particular electrical vehicle system of disconnecting a battery. And there's kind of some wild video of it just sort of like shooting off, which frightened many people because, like, you know, what if it caught on fire? And what if someone was standing in the way? We're describing the device that caused the battery to be removed from the vehicle. And that's why many media outlets use this particular form of the word to describe that device. Thanks again to Abdi for suggesting today's verb. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.